if you find yourself or somebody on your team saying, well, it's not our problem, it's not our responsibility. Well, if you want to have punch list problems, if you want to eliminate punch list problems, then you need to adopt a mentality that says, all right, maybe it's not our responsibility, but it's our problem, so let's go fix it. Paolo, thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast. How are you doing today?
Todd, it's wonderful to meet you. Love the show.
Excellent. So let's jump into it. Tell us about your career leading up to and prior to the start of Boxabl, and then we'll get into Boxabl. But tell us about your career before you got into the business you're currently running now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of degrees back in the dark ages in industrial design and mechanical engineering. And I started a company called 500 Group that was an intellectual property licensing company, which is just a fancy way of saying, we invented things, technology, mostly hard goods, not software, and licensed them to industry in exchange for a royalty. So it's really a rather simple business model. And over the decades, we got very good at inventing stuff and just did everything, obviously building construction, automotive, consumer goods. I mean, we did everything over the decades. So we were really sort of generalist inventors. So very, very interesting. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to look at the business and say, what if we were operators in a space? I think whatever business you're in, I think the grass maybe sometimes always looks a bit greener on the other side. So if you're an attorney and you're doing paperwork for a client, they may say, wow, that's a really interesting business they're in. And for us as licensors, which is we are licensing our patents and inventions to industry, we would always look and say, well, we're not sure, but they're making a mistake here. It could be a little bit more efficient there. And over time, we could see issues with the way that our product was being licensed, that maybe not extracting the best value. So we said, well, why don't we become operators in a space? And could we onboard the skills to do that? Because obviously we were in a very narrow and deep category at that time. And we said to ourselves, if we're going to do that, we need to find a big problem. It's the same amount of effort to work on a big problem as it is to a small problem. So let's find the super big problem and let's see if we can do some good. We're certainly not the Me Too people, obviously, because it's all about the innovation. So that wasn't even a question, but let's do some good. So the company is a for-profit company because our shareholders and staff need to be rewarded and they're compensated. But we are also a good works company. And so coming back to the problem at hand, we said, well, we looked at a few different businesses and said, well, building construction looks to be pre-industrial. By pre-industrial, I simply mean not built in a factory. And we thought, okay, can we fix that problem? Which is obviously a longer discussion. But the sort of net conclusion was, yeah, we think we can fix that problem. So then I said about monetizing the business, which really meant selling the licenses back to our licensees, so they would have full autonomy. And we found ourselves to be in a rather strong position to do that, because if we didn't sell it to them, we were going to sell it to their competitor in some instances. So we found ourselves in a rather strong position. It took a couple of years to monetize that, and we were out on the East Coast. And it's about 6 years ago. We said, okay, that's it. It took our staff. We concluded the relationships with the staff that stayed on the East Coast. I think everybody was very, very happy with the way that concluded. And we took just a few key people brought out to the West Coast to start Boxabl. And so that would be really a sort of fast forward through my career up until 6 years ago to start the business. And my general philosophy has always been a blend of industrial design. Everything has to be beautiful, frankly, and then the mechanical engineering and those first principles that we're applying to Boxabl are really a whole philosophy of how to manufacture for consumer goods and the ultimate customer, and so on and so forth.
So talk about Boxabl. maybe a few people out there who aren't familiar with Boxabl, but what does Boxabl do?
So Boxabl solves the building construction problem. So if it's okay with you, I could describe the problem and how we've gone about solving it. So just to go on from what I was saying, how did we fix the building construction problem? We looked at the marketplace and we said, gosh, this not only is it a global need, it's a global crisis. It's certainly our national crisis is home affordability. And we looked at the product and said, wow, this has variable quality, long lead times, and very expensive, very, very expensive. And, why is that? And coming back to that term, well, it's pre-industrial, and pre-industrial means it's quite literally built out. These products are built all as in my world as one-off prototypes in an open field with hammers and air guns and sticks of wood. And we said, well, you'll never be efficient that way. You'll never be efficient that way. So why isn't it post-industrial? Why isn't it in a factory? Why can't we take the advantage of everything we can use in a modern world by having everything built in a factory? And the reason is rather obvious and glaring, is that the product is big. Homes are big. So how do you pack those? And there are, of course, factory solutions. There are trailer homes. Nobody wants those as a first choice. There are tiny homes, which is a desperate cry for affordability. Nobody really can live in those for any long period of time. There are modular homes, which would be the closest thing to a livable product. In fact, the modular code is a higher standard than the stick-built code, but they bring what I'll call field materials and processes, bits of wood, air guns, small equipment, and then put that in a factory, use inappropriate materials and equipment because they are in a factory, and then build something that's illegally wide to ship. And then they're stuck with a product that can only ship a couple of 100 miles. So that doesn't work. And by illegally wide, that's about 14 foot wide. So they need flag cars front and rear. They need cranes. They need state permits. It's an absolute disaster. It can never scale. It's not a solution. And they know it too. They're just looking for a better solution. So the principles of Boxabl are many. The innovations are many. We have, I think, 60 or 70 mechanical patents in the short time that we've been operating. And one of the key aha moments is that we realized that most building construction is about 2/3 empty space and pretty inexpensive space. And then the remaining third is what we call dollar dense, which is dollar dense in terms of labor and dollar dense in terms of equipment and appliances. So as a principle, we said to ourselves, okay, well, what happens if we leave that core, that dollar dense, build it out in a factory with repeatability and high quality and speed, and then just take the empty space and fold it down? Easier said than done. So one of the main principles that gave sort of pulse to the business, if you like, is that the Boxabl product ships down the road 8.5 foot wide, 8.5 foot wide, which is very narrow. And it can ship all around national borders and can ship overseas within standard shipping infrastructure. Well, that's great, but obviously 8.5 foot wide is not good. We unpack, and some of you viewers may have seen this on the internet, and to 20 foot wide, which is staggering. So it triples in volume. So you use one truck instead of 3 for any given amount of volume. And we have very, very tall ceilings at 9.5 feet. And the largest building shell is 40 foot long. So if you look at those basic metrics and you say, I have a 20 foot wide room, it's 40 foot long, I have a huge 9.5 foot ceiling, I have a 40 foot clear span, and I can cut windows and doors because of the way we build with no headers. That sounds like a great first principle, to have these big building boxes stack, connect, and cantilever to build most products most of the time. And we said, that's very interesting. So that would be the biggest and most visible key innovation. And of course, there are hundreds of innovations behind that. I think most folks think that A new invention is just one thing, but it's just one thing backed up by lots of smaller things. So that would be a super high level, 30,000 foot view of the sort of the Boxabl principles that allow us to create a building system to make most things most of the time.
Speaking of principles, you've used the term first principles a couple of times. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's right to the mechanical design and certainly industrial design. So first principle is when something cannot be deconstructed any further. It cannot be deconstructed. What is the problem? What is the heart of the problem? How are we making these things? Lay those out. And how simple can we get this? How can we identify the problem so it can't be deconstructed any further? And we're sort of animals about that here in terms of those principles. And we go through from the large, which I've just taken a moment to explain, to the granular level. So we are taking passes at the problem, and it's getting ever into focus. So I just described, one of the big ones, obviously, and we go right down to washer level. Should we make that washer? Is it the right shape washer? Should we make our own washer? I'll give you a couple of examples, if I may. Our kitchen and bathroom cabinetry, we looked at that and we realized that the entire industry was set up for modular construction, standard box steps, standard box lengths and heights and things like that. And we realized our kitchens and baths aren't modular. They fit in this space, and we are making thousands, and then we will make tens of thousands and no doubt millions. So when you look at the problem that way, you say, well, what is the principle on that? It's, well, it fits in that space. We don't need an inappropriate solution, in which case would have been modular cabinet boxes. So we were able to take out over a third of the material, have a stronger product. We're able to apply some of that money in what is a very affordable product from, let's say, a Formica countertop to a quartz countertop that's 3 inches deep, and have it designed for assembly production, the lowest quantity of fasteners, the lowest quantity of unique parts, the most amount of symmetrical parts, have all the doors the same size, which is also pleasing to the eye. The best part is no part, right? Remove a part, remove a process. I mean, these are all wonderful things that we live and breathe every day here. And it yields massive, massive benefits. I'll give you one more, if I may, which is our shower. When we started, we had to get an order out for the Department of Defense. So we made a shower in a traditional way with the pan and the walls and everything like that. And I think we were buying those in at around $800, really super nice. And then we said, okay, so then we designed our own. We gave the customer more value. They're normally like 6.5 foot tall. We made our showers 8 foot tall. You stand in that shower, boy, do you feel small, which is good because you want the shower to feel big. And we engineered that ourselves. We took out a lot of the components. We vacuum formed it to get to market quickly. The cost came down into the 400s. Now we know we have a good design. We're injection molding without getting into the details of those different processes, which has a higher tool cost, higher capital investment, but much higher speed and lower cost. Our shower today is under $100. And it will be anything you can buy at, say, a Home Depot. I mean, our showers are gorgeous. We get complimented on them all the time. So these are the sort of principles I'm talking about. And if I think about the shower, with injection molding rather than vacuum forming, we can put ears and tabs and drainways for water so we don't get mold over the years. And so those are a couple, 3 examples of first principles. And when you're in the sort of the heat of the development battle, and sort of the fog of development, if you like, to continue my warlike analogies, it gives you a fantastic tow rope through the fog to get from one end to the other, to get to the best solution. And the best solution is the highest quality, the lowest price, manufactured at the highest speed possible. So we stick with these fundamentals over and over and over again. And the net result of where we are headed directionally is a price that I think nobody's going to be, and a speed that nobody's going to be able to really believe, actually.
Yeah, I love that concept of first principles. And I'm curious how this would apply to, say, a business process. If there's we spend a lot of time working with our clients on systematizing their business, identifying areas of chaos, putting systems in place that solve the root cause of the problem. I find that a lot of people are dealing with symptoms of problems, and getting to the root cause solves it. I'm curious, how would one go about using this concept of first principles for a people problem or a business, not a manufacturing or a construction issue, but a people problem or a process problem?
Yeah, that's such a nice question. And if I may, I'll relate my answer to the building construction field, as that's your audience, that's what we're doing, and yourself. So for Boxabl, we don't rely on those principles just from the outside of the walls in on our product, although we certainly do that. But we look outside as well, and we also say whether we are making a profit or not making a profit on any part of that business, on any part from supply chain to customer delivery, we should be assisting if we can. So that's what we're doing. I'll give you one example. When we unpack our Boxabl, it triples in size. That means we ship, as I mentioned earlier, 3 trucks instead of 1. But we go beyond that. We've engineered our product to be picked up by an oversized telehandler, oversized forklift rather than a crane. Why is that good? Well, it's less expensive. The certs are less. You can get them into kind of nadgery corners if it's going into a backyard or something. Much easier. There's much less coordination. That's great. It's outside of our borders. It's outside of our factory walls, but it helps our customer. The product itself can be taken off the truck with no forklift, no crane. Our driver can do that in about 15 minutes and be on his way. Why is that good? Well, he can be on his way. He doesn't have to waste half of his day. And then let's say we have a development and the product is going down. We can do up to 2 stories with that telehandler. And even a large development that might have a crane on site, well, guess what? It's not only expensive, but it's on site because it's busy. So even though it's there, we don't want to use it. And above 2 stories, of course, you have to have a crane. So those are pretty good. In other areas, for example, our product can be set down on a slab or a basement foundation. We provide all of those drawings. They're engineered for 50 states because we do it once and customers by the thousands can avail themselves of it. That sounds like a really good deal because that's additional friction, additional time, and additional money, which is great. And as we roll out the products nationally, and the local building inspector, let's say, the more sort of granular level, gets to the first time, maybe he scratches his head and he'll give that builder or developer a harder time. The second time he sees it, he's going to be happy because he knows what it is, and he can go home and go home to his family. He can go to a bar, but he can knock off early, and it just reduces friction in the equation. And then if we step back from some of those examples and we look at from beginning to end, we have raw material at one end, and we have the consumer, the customer, at the other end. So in terms of applying those first principles to any business, the way we're doing it, certainly at Boxabl, is modifiable to any business endeavor. We've zoomed out and we're looking at the whole thing. So for example, we are now saying, well, how do we put a thread through everything in between the raw material to a delivered product? And we said, well, we're systemized, which is something I believe you understand, Todd, pretty well. And we're systemized. So the systemization allows you to put time, money, and energy into tying that system together, the components of that system together. So the way we're doing it, and I appreciate not every business can do this. We're in the midst of hiring our first core team of software engineers, code writers, half a dozen or so folks, and we will have software that ties all these components together using things that are available in a modern world when you have a systemized product, when you have mass production and repeatability, so that, let's say, it's all driven by the end user's eyeballs, that they can go online. They're not going to buy a house online, and they're going to come see it and all that. But to get there, we can have a system whereby that customer, it could be a consumer, it could be a builder, it could be a developer, it could be the builder or developer's architect, goes online. They can choose from a bunch of pre-configured homes, or they can just start on their own, moving things around, snapping together with a BOM, a bill of materials that's updating with the price in real time, and even provides a mortgage. I'm sure we'll be absorbing a mortgage company at some point in the near future, just to speed everything through. And that gives them the tools to be able to take the next step and order that home. And you can't do that unless you've got, a staggering amount of sophisticated software that goes all the way through to our supply chains. And you can only do that if you have a systemized product. You can't do that with custom product. And we thread the needle with that as well, in that our factory creates repeatability. Factories want to make the same thing over and over again to be ultra efficient, but the customer is the person that's paying, and they want customization. So Boxabl really provides that as well. So I think you have to first be able to look outside your own factory borders to see the entire scope of the problem. And if you look at anybody that's successful in life, if you look at individuals, yourself and others in your life, it's the folks who take responsibility, whether it's their responsibility or not, that provide enduring solutions and are successful. And that certainly applies to corporations as well.
Yeah, I really like that idea of zooming. Two things I heard you say. One is to zoom out and not just look at one little part within your boundaries, and then take ownership and take responsibility for things outside of those That's boundaries. So, for example, say for commercial general contractors or home builders, they're dealing with punch lists that are a nightmare, and they can't get away from projects. Well, the solution, it's very difficult to solve that once you're in it, but the solution is to look at the entire process from construction all the way back through pre-construction, design, the sales process, look at the entire process and start with the end in mind and reverse engineer a project that will end up with less of a punch list nightmare. And there's a lot of things that go into that. But it, as you said, it requires two things: zooming out, looking at the whole thing, and then taking ownership or responsibility of things that could be labeled as someone else's problem. And that's not a good, if you find yourself or somebody on your team saying, well, it's not our problem, it's not our responsibility. Well, if you want to have punch list problems, if you want to eliminate punch list problems, then you need to adopt a mentality that says, all right, maybe it's not our responsibility, but it's our problem. So let's go fix it. And then everybody wins. So speaking of problems, I read a quote that I think was attributed to you, and it says this. I believe you said, the first thing you have to do when you start any new product is to identify the problems and not try to fix problems that aren't problems. So identify the problems and then not try to fix problems that aren't problems. So I'm curious, what were some of the problems that you decided that you made an intentional effort that you were not going to fix?
Right. So this is this again is the absolute first principle. I'll turn what I said upside down, if I may, make it a little bit more intelligible. Is to say, ask the right question. Ask the right question. So oftentimes a project or a brief starts by asking the wrong questions. So you have to really think, first of all, have you asked, the right question? And then if you can get to that, which is not so easy, by the way, it took us several years to even figure out the questions of what is the problem here before we could start to endeavor to figure out a solution. Folks see that we've been up and out of the ground at this big old factory behind me about 18 months, but it's taken 5 years to get here. And it's taken at least another 5 years in planning just to figure out asking the right questions. So, some people have said it less kindly, don't ask dumb questions, but I don't think there really are any dumb questions. But let's get to the asking the right question first, and then pursue that problem. Otherwise, you're fixing problems that you have no need to be fixing. So for example, the problem of how our walls are made was not on the front line of questions that we were asking. The first question that we had to ask was, can we ship it? Because we can't ship it. We haven't got anything. And then once we realized we could ship it, then as a secondary but very important problem, we said, well, how are we making our walls? This doesn't look terribly smart to us. Seems antiquated and is for human scale weights and picking things up and such. So we didn't start, for example, by saying, how should we make our walls? Let's reinvent that. We said, how are we going to ship it? So there is a sequence to these things as well. And the other thing is not all things need fixing. So if you think of the expression of a commodity is what you see everywhere around us. And a commodity I would describe is what's left after everything that doesn't work has been thrown out, right? So everything that doesn't work has been thrown out for whatever reason, whatever the metrics of that issue are. So definitely be respectful of the way things are made, because it is the current solution. It is the current solution. And again, I'll just say it again, because I think it's worth repeating. It's what's left after everything that doesn't work has been thrown out. So you can have a sort of a simple arrogance going into a new field of endeavor or problem and say, oh, well, we know better, we've done this before, sort of thing. But you have to pay tremendous respect to the commodity. And then when you're done beating it up, then you can throw it out the door and do something hopefully better if something concerning that problem has changed. So for example, how do we make a wall? Well, in the field, kind of makes sense. And I could go on about that. Put it in a factory, absolutely does not make sense.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a quote. Peter Drucker, the great management guru, said, "There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently something that shouldn't be done at all." So, and I've seen that a lot. I'm reminded of an example. I spent a few days with a builder, and they had this particular part of their process. It was a walkthrough with the client at a certain phase of the project, and everybody just complained about this walkthrough and how it was supposed to be a 30-minute walkthrough, and it turned into a 3-hour nightmare, and it just set off all sorts of problems. And so they were asking, like, how do we do this better? Do we come up with a better agenda? Do we do it virtually? And I said, why are we doing it at all? And everyone sort of looked up and said, I don't know. Do we have to do this? And within a few minutes, we had axed that particular walkthrough because it didn't need to be done. It actually caused more problems than it solved. So one of the first steps is elimination. Just eliminate and not solve problems. Yeah.
I think just to add to that, I think that there is a difference between a field builder, and that's the universe right now, is field builders versus factory production. There are some very, very significant differences in how you can approach a problem. So a field builder is essentially building what we would term prototypes, one at a time. They can make the same thing over and over again. They're still prototypes. They're still all handmade, still custom made. Mm-hmm. So the effort to ask those questions of whether something should be in or something should be out, or is there a better way, can't practically be addressed because the profits will be gone. The highest component cost of any home is human labor. So if you're going to spend time, staring at your navel and thinking about fixing this problem or eliminating that, and it's on one, what I'll call a prototype home, that builder can't afford the time to do that. And I'm sure that folks are nodding right now. Those profits will evaporate in a heartbeat. And it's only mass production and repeatability where the time and energy and money and brain power can be applied and expended to find and eliminate problems, large and small. So it's not possible a lot of the time. You're going to put those extra elements in. I'll just put that extra piece of wood in and brace it up, and we're done, rather than re-engineering the whole thing. So I do have a tremendous amount of sympathy for, current field builders. And that's the solution that we're bringing to ease their burden, allow them to turn projects much, much faster with less resources, less back office, less capital resources, money, et cetera, et cetera.
You said that one of the keys to figuring out which problems not to solve was to ask the right questions. So how do you go about finding the right questions to ask? Do you have a standard list of mind-opening questions? Is there a framework? Any advice you can offer to someone who's wondering, all right, that sounds great, but I don't know what I don't know. What are some of the right questions I should ask?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it depends on a case-by-case basis of what the problem you're asking. It may not be a physical problem, let's say, but if we just relate it to something tangible, if we anchor it to sort of the physical world and the product, the business we're in and the business that your listeners are in, let's say, coming back to any part of that and say, you look at the kitchen and just start with why. Don't take anything for granted. Don't take anything as written. Don't take anything as acceptable or the right way. Doesn't mean it's the wrong way, but however many whys you can ask, that's what you ask. That's what you ask. You just have to go and go, well, why is it done like that? Well, why is that? And you're like a 12-year-old at that point, getting brought to school, and you keep asking your dad why, and whatever he answers, you used to give another why. But that's the level that we go to. So just ask why. Why are we doing it this way? Why is that done that way? Why is there a screw in that? Why is that piece there? And the flip side of that coin is, what's this being used for? Well, why is it being used for that? What's it being used for? So ask why, and then what's it being used for? And those can be tow lines for really, I think, any problem, whether it's physical, digital, emotional, doesn't matter.
I like that. I really like that. Why are we doing this? What's it being used for? Why is this here? What do we need this for? And sometimes I think there's the curse of knowledge. Someone's been around for years or decades doing something. It's difficult for them to ask those questions. Whereas if you bring someone in from the outside and tell them, hey, poke holes in everything we're doing here, and ask, why is this here? Why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What's the benefit? There's a real advantage to outsiders coming in for that.
Here we have a couple of hundred people here. We're just sort of warming up. And in the front office in our engineering team, we have precisely nobody from the building construction industry, not because we have an aversion to them. It's just not the skill sets we're looking for. But we bring those standard practices in when we think we have a better solution. We're not arrogant. We're just looking for the best solution. We don't care we're agnostic about where ideas come from. We had a whole philosophy about that, by the way. And we bring, let's back to those cabinets. We've brought in three separately, cabinet experts with manufacturing operations down to craftsmen, and we just poke and ask those questions. So it's a tremendous amount of due diligence to get to the bottom of a problem, to really get to the bottom of the problem, so you can construct a solution.
Yeah, I think there's a quote floating around the internet about some famous historical figure. If he had an hour to chop down a tree, he would spend 50 minutes sharpening the axe. And another one, maybe Einstein, said if he had 6 hours to solve a problem, he would spend most of the time clearly identifying the problem. What is the problem that we're trying to solve here? So great advice. I like that. Let's talk about this issue of housing affordability. Some, probably many, would say that we have a housing affordability crisis in America. What do you think?
Yeah, 1,000%. I think it's global as well. And there are factors that are outside of Boxabl controls. And I think there's a saying that, give me the wisdom to know what I can fix and what I can't. So, obviously, as a country, we print obscene amounts of money, causes massive inflation, devalues what's in your pocket. It's really a form of theft, and it causes really a foundational and structural problem. But we don't have the power to fix that. So that's going to result in high land costs and things like that. So we know we can't fix those. But we do have a housing crisis, and it's the only marketplace where we accept really kind of the garbage that we accept, where a secondhand product costs more than a new product, oftentimes, right? When you buy a used car and your used pickup truck and it costs more than your new pickup truck, there's something wrong with the world. And then the standard of quality that we all have to put up with, you wouldn't put up with in any other area of your life. If you got an iPhone and the button was in the wrong spot, you'd be pretty upset, or it didn't line up, or there wasn't an even gap. But we almost like power lines along the highway that you just wind up not seeing. It's not part of your reality. We all have a sort of a collective low standard of what's acceptable when we walk into a home. And, that's all because of the field construction, a lot of things we've spoken about before. So we can't fix the inflation, we can't fix the money printing, we can't fix the land issue, but we absolutely can fix how homes are made, delivered, and used, because the Boxabl product not only can be unpacked, but it can be packed and unpacked hundreds of times. So you could see situations where somebody wants to, move to another part of the country. When they say you're moving house, I think at Boxabl, we actually might mean it quite literally. And I think in the arc of, as Boxabl grows up, and I think in the arc of the life of a family, let's say, you can imagine how things can become more affordable, that the homeowner can control. I'll just as an example, you just think of a young married couple, and then they need a bedroom, and they can add a bedroom, and they can add a nursery, and they can add a deck very quickly, very affordably. And as in the arc of that, as the empty nesters and the kids go to college and get jobs, and the tax rates in their town have inflated, by the square foot of the property. Well, they can pack some of those bedrooms up and be left with a deck on a second story, put it on to a secondary market like eBay, make money, lower their taxes. So it gives much more fluidity and movability to that building construction puzzle. And that's not something that anybody can really imagine today, because there isn't the product with which they can imagine it. And I would say that it's also very hard for us here at Boxabl to imagine how those products are going to be used and reused. Again, it's that part of that whole problem pie, and just attacking everything down to its fundamental level, arriving at the best solution, arriving at the best equipment to get that solution. So it's a very interesting, multifaceted process. But sort of overarchingly, I would say, as we can continue to scale, I won't share any numbers today, but there are two main parts of the business. There are the building shells that we create, which are these 20 by 20, 20 by 30, and 20 by 40 building boxes, just like big Legos. They're really universal. And then we call it a configuration. So our point of entry to the marketplace has been the casita, which has been incredibly well received. But that's just a configuration. So what we're attacking right now is the most commonly repeatable thing most of the time, which for our factory are the building shells. So we know that the volume will be staggering on those. And as you work into some of those repeatable elements and getting to the best solution, we've got some spreadsheets here that as we continue to scale, those building shells at least are going to a price point that nobody can imagine. We can barely believe it. The prices are going to be so remarkably good that we think we become sort of a default starting point, even if you need an extremely custom home, that you can do most of it with Boxabl and then do the custom bits, and you can keep your money in your pocket, get it towards the end, get it next day or the day after. But I think the retail price of the product in the kind of volumes that we're talking about, I think people's heads will explode. So that's the bit that we can help with, and then help with the peripheral things of timing and time is money and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Let's talk about vision. A lot of business owners and CEOs struggle to get their team on board with the vision, or maybe even to articulate the vision for the company. You obviously have a big vision. How do you think about sharing your vision with your team?
Yeah. So I would say that we share the vision beyond our team. So everything I'm about to say would apply to everybody that bothers to Google us, frankly. The team that we have here is remarkable. We have, not directly answering your question, but I mean, we have automotive engineers, we have aerospace engineers, chemical engineers. So they're pretty smart bunch. So they do take less convincing. But we live it every day. We have a very transparent, my business partner and I run a very, very transparent business. Of course, no business can be wholly transparent. There are secrets here and there, commercial secrets. But we run an extraordinary transparent company because we absolutely have nothing to hide. If I can be modest for the company, if we don't screw this up, this is one of those companies, full on air quotes. Is it a Tesla? Is it a Google? Yeah. How many, Tesla, I mean, it is in fairness run by the smartest man on the planet, but just putting that small thing aside for a moment, the automotive industry, this it's a 100-year-old business with dozens of large players making, in a lot of instances, a commodity product. And here you have Tesla joining the ranks, I think, remarkably so, by the way. Whereas we're making houses that the folks that are making field houses will buy from us, your listeners, and have a much, much better, faster, more profitable experience. So you're going to build more Boxables, or you're going to build more Tesla, or build more cars? Well, no, you're going to build more homes. So it is a staggeringly vast enterprise that we're considering here. And the folks here get that. The folks here understand that. And we live and breathe it every day. We are a design company. We are mechanical engineers. I used the word earlier on, which everything has to be beautiful. Everything has to be detailed out. And they come here. We pay attention to the work environment. We treat them very well. We just live it every day, on our factory side, little things, it's a happy environment. There's the lunch stipend every day. There is monthly, we all get together, the office and the factory gets together. This all helps communication, share the vision. It's just constantly being open and communicating. One of the things which I think makes it easier for all of our staff to believe the vision is they all get stock options. So we have a young guy out on the factory floor pushing a broom, just getting started with his career. He has no idea what a stock option is. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't. But he'll be happy, one day that he does. And I think we're also overweight with engineers. So they're always, of course, looking to the future. But I would say, in short, it's really transparency. And I think, we have a lot of fun with the videos. It's a modern world. It's a social media world. So we get to have fun, and it's actually good for business. But we're very, very, transparent. It's a lot easier to repeat the thing you said before if it's the truth. And you're not overly marketing, you're not exaggerating. And the vision is vast, I have to say. The vision is absolutely vast. So I think that makes it easier as well. But if the team isn't producing the vision starts to become unbelievable. And the bigger the vision, perhaps the harder it is to convince folks of what we're doing and our own staff of what we're doing. So far, we're definitely tracking ahead of where we thought we would be. Everything is trending significantly to the upside and the larger side. And so I'm not sure that I have any concise way of telling you how we share a vision. And the vision is somewhat abstract right now as well, because people see a tiny home and they say, well, what are you talking about world domination for when you're making a tiny home? So it takes a little bit of work.
Yeah. I think what I heard you say is transparency, just being transparent.
Yeah.
Relationships. That's great advice. One of my favorite questions to ask, we have a few minutes left. And so I want to ask this: what is something that you believe to be true about business that some might think is unconventional, maybe even crazy?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is you don't give up. And I just see people left and right giving up all the time. Not inside our four walls, I can tell you, but we don't give up. And people just give up way too soon. And I mean people in the daily work life, let alone an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur and you think you're going to give up, you better not do it. You better go get a job. So don't give up. Don't give up until you've just left it all on the mat and you've got nothing left. That's one. And the other one is be strong. Be strong. Don't let people push you around. Don't let people push your company around. And we do things, to your point, that don't make business sense. Oftentimes people think maybe the company is a soft touch. And if I can speak personally for a moment, sometimes people think I'm a soft touch. I'm no soft touch. I'm nice and I'm fair and I'm smiling. And, if when people try to take advantage of that, we don't let them take advantage of that. So we might remedy a situation, let's say through the courts, for something that an accountant rightfully would say, this is going to cost you more to remedy than it is for you to chase down. But I'm pretty hard and fast about that. Maybe I have the luxury of being able to have a larger budget and spend those monies to not let folks take advantage of the company. If they're taking advantage of the company, they're taking advantage of our vision and our staff and our investors. And, we don't let that happen. And so when folks realize, well, I better not try that on because it's not going to be a money thing. It's going to be about doing the right thing. That becomes fairly powerful. And I may have brought that over from our intellectual property licensing business, where we'd get knocked off all the time. And we'd sue our own licensees. And, we could be a somewhat smaller intellectual property licensing company compared to multi-billion-dollar licensees, and they would just try it on with a version of. And we're sort of like a pit bull with lockjaw, So don't give up. Don't let people take advantage of you. Defend your business, defend your people, and that should eventually give you a business that can serve your customer.
Great advice. So don't give up. That sounds great on the surface. Just don't quit. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. But what do you believe? What happens when somebody doesn't give up? Like, is there something that happens inside of them? Is there something that happens outside of them when they don't give up? Like, why do you think don't give up is so powerful?
So I think it just comes down to genetics and wiring and your internal strength and how you wire the company that you're building. If you're fortunate enough, like I am, to build a company, it's difficult, it's painful, but it's almost a compulsion. I'm not sure I can give you a better answer, than that.
It's just something that's in there. Yeah.
And I would say that it could be a great asset and it could be a great flaw as well. So you have to have the judgment to know where you're at,
Interesting. How can it How can it be a flaw?
Well, I mean, if you're wrong, if you've got a bad idea and you're wrong, but you never give up, that's not the smartest thing. If I could just take a moment to discuss ideas, if we have a few moments.
Sure.
We're all very well trained here that the best idea is the idea that somebody else has. I mean, that's just not it's not just a saying. We live and breathe it every day. The way we innovate is someone has an idea, we sit around the table and we hash it out. And ideas are iterative, whether it's spoken or unspoken, and they go around the table and over the months or even years. And the person that originated the germ of the idea is not necessarily the end result. And a lot of the things the guys will hear me say all the time, a lot of the time, is I don't think this is a good idea, but, and then I'll say it out loud because it's not a good idea, but I'm going to say it out loud in the hopes that it can go around the table and become a good idea or die the honorable death that it deserves. And we never talk about it again. The nicest thing for me, and everybody here is to train this way, is to take your ego out of it completely and go for the best idea. But here's why. In practice, you say something, it's not the best idea. Somebody else says, no, but what if we do this instead? And they come up with a better idea. This is like the best thing I could possibly hear, because now I can do a couple of things. First of all, I can jump over the fence to their side of the aisle where they have the better idea, number one, which is less work and easier for me, and I can get on with my day. And secondly, they have the better idea. So I don't have to spend time convincing them that my idea is better. Their idea is better. There's no convincing. I've taken time out of the equation as well. So we'd laugh about it here a lot, and everybody's trained to take their ego out of it, jump the fence, get to the best idea, and just keep going around and around and around. And then, we all benefit. And I would say that that's from a lifetime of running an IP licensing company.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that process. Great stuff. Well, this has been fantastic, Paolo. I really appreciate it. We're just about out of time. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer. But if people want to learn more about what you're up to and follow you, either your website, social media, connect with you, where are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Boxabl, Boxabl. There's no E on the end. Put a .com on there. You can check out what's on the website. And I would say for more frequent information and craziness, and there is a lot of craziness if your viewers Google a few things there. We've done some crazy things, is the socials, everything from, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and things like that. The company is exploding. We are here in fabulous, North Las Vegas, Nevada. It's not the most terrible place to live. And anyone that's listening and is brilliant and wants to contribute, you can always reach out to us at hiring@Boxabl. We're onboarding as quickly as we can. We're very picky. Whoever comes to work for us, they know that they'll be talking with a peer group that is like-minded, with them, that is sort of a go-getters and following a shared vision.
Fantastic. Well, keep up the great work. I'll be sure to watch and follow what you're up to, and I think I'll go follow you on social media to watch some of that craziness, see what you guys are doing. So,
and come out and visit. Las Vegas, not the worst place to come and visit.
Yeah, definitely. Great stuff, Paolo. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Todd. Thank you so much.